I call Simon O'Connor.
Speaker, as I've been listening to the speeches from the opposition, I'm reminded of Hemingway's book, The Old Man and the Sea, the marlin that just goes round and round and round. And while, particularly from the Labour Party, the rhetoric is not going to win any Nobel Prize for literature, I suspect some of their leader, Mr Cunliffe's fiction, might. But, Mr Speaker, this is a good bill. The government will not apologise for any elements. We are proud of this bill. Those of us on the committee have worked hard, and I commend it to the House.
The Honourable Mary Ann Street.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Yes, it is a split call. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the fact that none of the members opposite and the government benches can muster more than 20 or 30 seconds to speak on this bill, just as they couldn't on the one before it, is absolutely tragic. It is something that demonstrates that they cannot justify their own legislation. They cannot justify why this House should be passing legislation of this kind, and they have now, in the 3 hours nearly since question time, this has been their contribution, that they just want to swing votes through on the numbers and never mind the justification. Well, Mr Speaker, I want to speak to the part of this bill which is the exclusive economic continental shelf environmental effects bill. I wish it were. I wish it were about environmental effects. The trouble is, Mr Speaker, that this bill amends once again very weak legislation around the exclusive economic zone, which has done little to protect the environment. And while I acknowledge there is work that needed to be done in that area, the work that this government has done is not going to protect the environment. And given that the government is now considering making oil and gas exploration non-notifiable under the Resource Management Act, and the fact that it's passed legislation banning protests at sea, in order to advance the oil and gas companies' interests, it's absolutely clear that they have no interest in maintaining the environment. So the weakest possible legislation they can get away with their slim majority, is what they are putting up. Not only was it weak to start with, but now we have a shambolic process, because the government, as with other pieces of legislation, has brought legislation to the House just a month ago with the EEZ legislation with 37 pages of amendments in the form of this bill, and now we have the government trying to amend something which it only recently addressed. So it's hard to imagine just how a piece of legislation might be amended to be even less effective than it was before. But this shambolic approach to matters that are of not only interest but importance to the environment that our few little islands exist in shows that the government has no regard either for process or for content or for anything that might protect New Zealand's environmental interests ahead of the economic interests of offshore investors. So, Mr Speaker, Labor opposes the Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Amendment Bill, while we are supporting the other part of this legislation. The fact that when one looks at the legislation here that's all of a piece, whether it is the Crown Minerals legislation, whether it is the Resource Management Act, whether it is marine legislation, Mr Speaker, we can see that the government is working all of a piece to further the interests of the oil and gas industry or anybody who might be able to make a buck out of the environment without protecting it. So this has to be seen in the context of other pieces of legislation, and this government has to go down in history as the one which has protected the environment the least. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Denise Roach.
Thank you, Mr.